Yesterday, a man drove a truck through the front doors of Temple Israel in West Bloomfield, Michigan. He drove it down a hallway. There were 140 children in that building. A preschool. They were learning their letters, probably singing even, and playing with Play-Doh, having fun. The security personnel stopped him. The attacker died. No congregants were killed. When I say no congregants were killed, I want you to hear that I'm not saying that nothing happened. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying we are fine. I'm not saying they are fine. The synagogue, in fact, one of the largest Reform congregations in this country, with around 12,000 members, was attacked in the middle of a Thursday afternoon because it was a synagogue, because they were Jewish. I want to sit with you for just a moment on that pastoral truth of what it means. I'm sure, like me, we can collectively say we are tired. Many of us are afraid. Some of us have children. When I wrote this, I was thinking of, even in our building, thinking my kids might join us this evening. Unfortunately, they're not here. But in many congregations, on a Friday night or Saturday morning, there are children running around, praying, in a place that we hope is always safe. We are holding grief for West Bloomfield, for the Netherlands, for other places that have experienced anti-Semitism around this world, and underneath it, we are holding additional grief for Pittsburgh, for Poway, for the attacks that many of us have tried to outrun for years. It's real. And frankly, the exhaustion itself can be understood as whole. The fear does not mean that you have a lack of faith. Rather, I think it means it's an opportunity for all of us to pay attention. Rabbi Asher Knight, a former classmate of mine and a Jewish communal leader, wrote at 4 a.m. this morning and posted it on Facebook because he couldn't sleep, that relief is not the same thing as okay. He's a parent. He felt the relief that those children went home, and then wrote, what happens does not feel like an aberration, it feels like an exposure of normal life. He wrote about a church around the corner from his own synagogue. It doesn't lock its doors. He said, good for them. May they never need to, and I mean that. In contrast, the gap between their ordinary Thursday and ours has a real impact. And Jewish communities have had to normalize something which should never, ever have had to become normal. I want to stay with that just for a moment. Normal used to mean, in my mind, quiet. It used to mean you could expect what was going to happen because something similar had happened. Normal now means guards, cameras, locked doors, drills, a quiet understanding that someone, somewhere may decide that a place full of prayer, a place full of preschoolers is an acceptable target. Since I became a rabbi, I have never really experienced quiet. The vigilance, on the other hand, that's something I'm all too familiar with. Relief is not the same thing as okay. It's okay not, and okay is not the same thing as safe. And safe is not the same thing as free. So I need to ask you something hard. I need to ask you to pay attention in a different direction. Because this attack did not happen in a vacuum. It happened inside of a story, an old story. A story that if we are going to survive, we need to learn the grammar of that story in an intimate way. For the past year, my nerdy brain has been compiling a table of resources to make sense of anti-Semitism, specifically following the attack on our own congregation, that maps 7 specific anti-Semitic or anti-Jewish tropes that have re-entered mainstream political discourse. They are not new. These tropes have predecessors. in medieval Christianity, in passion plays, in the blood libels of the 12th century England, in racial pseudoscience, in the protocols of the elders of Zion. They have been dressed in new clothes, though, for the new century. But their mechanism, their function is the same. They transform Jews from human beings into symbols, and once you are a symbol, you can be destroyed without any regard to the moral consequence. The philosopher Michael Foucault, Michel Foucault, my brain had a moment, spent his career asking, not what does this statement mean, but what does this statement do? What subject does it produce? What becomes possible once it has been said? And I want us to ask that question tonight about the language circulating around Jewish people. It's not, is this person who said that, is that anti-Semitic? But that should no longer be our question. Our question needs to be, what does this discourse produce, and what has it historically enabled? Let me name 3 of them this evening, 3 of the ones that I think are the biggest on my table that I've put together, and the ones that I hear most often, because naming them, I think, is going to quickly become an act of survival for all of us. The first is Holocaust inversion. And you've heard it before, I'm sure. The Israelis are the new Nazis. The Star of David drawn as a swastika. Some of you may have seen that one on social media. It's not a political argument anymore. It is a rhetorical move that does something precise and vicious. It takes the defining crime of anti-Semitism, the one that impacted my family, the one that we learned about, the Holocaust, the murder of 6 million Jews, and turns it into a weapon against the Jews. It recasts us from victims of a genocide into perpetrators. It's saying your suffering was real, and we're going to use it to justify hating you. Scholar Leslie Kauf called this the inversion of morality. The Holocaust becomes not a crime committed against Jews, but a moral lesson the Jews have failed to learn. Do you feel the architecture of that? The same story that should generate empathy is restructured to produce contempt. Amy Jill Levine, the brilliant scholar of New Testament literature out of Vanderbilt, whose work anchors my analysis, describes a pattern that she traces through the centuries of Christian interpretation. The habit of making Judaism into a negative foil. Whatever Jesus represents, well, Judaism is the opposite. That same logic is now operating in political discourse. Whatever virtue demands, Jews embody its betrayal. The second is collective Jewish guilt. The Jews are killing children, not the Israeli government, not the IDF, not specific actors who have made a specific decision related to the functioning of their government, the Jews. All of us. In Macon, in West Bloomfield, and anywhere you turn, we're killing children. In the preschool classroom where 140 children were singing yesterday morning. This is the decided accusation wearing a different cloth. For 2,000 years, Christian theology has read the book of Matthew. His blood be upon us and on our children as a perpetual verdict against Jews, persons everywhere. The verse became a warrant for pogroms, for explosions, for the Inquisition. The mechanism has not changed, but the acquisition and use of it has. When diaspora Jews are held responsible for the decisions made by a foreign government, it's not a political analysis. That is an ancient structure of collective punishment that has been used to justify our prosecution for 3 millennia. And the third is a unique demonization. Israel's not merely criticized. Israel is uniquely, obsessively, cosmically, horrifically evil. Not merely wrong on policy, but the central source of contamination of the global moral order. The scholar David Nurnberg spends his career tracing what he calls anti-Judaism embedded in Western thought. The way the Jew becomes a totalizing symbol for whatever the culture most fears. Every century recasts us in the image of evil. Medieval Europeans saw Jews as poisoning wells and murderers of God. The 12th century cast us as racial contaminants. Now we're cast as settler colonialists, uniquely monstrous among all the nations of the world. Levine offers a test. When you are evaluating discourse about Israel or about Jews, ask, is this about a specific actor making a specific decision with a specific consequence? Or is the Jew functioning as a symbol, as a name for every single thing that is wrong in this world? The test matters because the line between legitimate criticism and ancient hatred is not so easy to see. I want to say this clearly because criticizing the Israeli government policy is not anti-Semitism. Advocating for Palestinian rights, not anti-Semitism. Documenting human suffering, not anti-Semitism. But there is rhetorical structure, a shape to the language that has been used to justify killing us for 2,000 years, and when it appears, it must be named. And tonight, I want to answer the question Foucault asked. What does discourse produce? It produces targets, and it produces survivors. We are the latter, and we have always been the latter. I want to tell you what I believe is true about yesterday. I believe the man who drove that truck into Temple, Israel, was a person who had been marinated in a story about Jews. A story assembled from fragments of tropes reinforced by algorithms and social feeds and political rhetoric that has normalized the idea that Jewish institutions are legitimate targets. I do not know his specific motivations. The FBI is still investigating. What I know is that violence does not emerge from nothing. It grows in soil, and the soil must be prepared. The Anti-Defamation League recorded more than 9,300 anti-Semitic incidents in 2024, the highest number since the ADL began counting in 1979. Rabbi Asher Knight wrote last night about the hidden injury of anti-Semitism, the way it does not only threaten us physically, but reroutes communal energy. Every dollar spent defending Jewish life from hate is a dollar that cannot be invested in building Jewish life itself. Our children, our teachers, our scholars, music, care, loving, joy, all of those fun, loving things that make us who we are not being invested in because we're investing in security just to protect us and survive. We need both. We need security and we need Jewish life in its fullest. And yet, this is where I must ask you to travel with me from grief to defiance. We are not without tools. We are not without voice. We are not without our Torah, and we are not without agency. The reason I became a rabbi and chose to study subsequently marriage and family therapy, by the way, is because I believe in my whole heart and my whole body in the way that my teacher, whom I love just from reading his books, Abraham Joshua Heschel, would call radical amazement is an imperative part of life. That is naming the amazement of all is the beginning of healing. That the capacity to say, this is what this is what that does, this is where it comes from, is an act of survival. The teachers at Temple Israel followed their training, and they kept their children safe and calm. Our children and all of us, frankly, need that same training too. Our training, though, is both ancient, hard-won, blood-soaked. Read our texts. You'll see it. We survived. And we need it also today, presently, in our own congregation. Anti-Semitism has a structure, and it's not random hostility. It is a set of interlocking narratives about Jewish power, Jewish guilt, Jewish cognition, each one activating the other, each one serving the function of making Jews into a symbol so that violence against us feels righteous rather than criminal. The table I've compiled, not an academic exercise, rather for me it's become a field guide. It is a way to bring a conversation forward. It's a way to share with a neighbor, a student, a friend, a child who asks, why did he drive a truck into the synagogue? It's what you bring to your heart when you are tempted to sit in despair. My friend Rabbi Asher Knight ended his 4 a.m. response with this: and still we gather, still we teach our children, still we show up for prayer and grief and celebration and learning and song, still we insist on building lives of meaning and warmth and connection inside conditions that too often ask us to become harder than we want to be. On the Shabbat after Pittsburgh, I told the congregation I was then serving, we will not let them take Shabbat from us. After I received the death threat to my home in the wake of the attack from the GDL on us and Macon, I have said that we will not live in fear and not let them take away our openness and our hospitality. Tonight I want to say even more. We'll not let them take our language. We will not let them take our ability to name what is happening. We will not let them take our capacity for analysis, for scholarship, for the ancient Jewish insistence that the world can be understood, that the text can be read, that the story has a grammar, and that grammar can be learned. The Talmud teaches, who is wise? One who learns from every person. And so tonight, I'm asking all of us to be wise. Not in the sense of detachment, but in the sense of clear sight. Grief and analysis, not opposites. You can hold a child close and hold a book also. You can weep for West Bloomfield and for all of the anti-Semitic incidents around this world, and also say clearly and identify the story that drove that truck. Because here's what I believe in the deepest truth I offer. The attack on West Bloomfield did not win. Those 140 children went home with their families, and the security personnel, the heroes, the ones who ran toward danger, did their job. And tonight, we are here. And earlier we studied, and today we pray. And now we are naming and refusing one more time to be symbols. We are people, Am Yisrael, the people who wrestle with God and survive the night. Shabbat Shalom.